Hello, and welcome to another week of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we're covering finale of Outpost Zero Volume 3, The Only Living Things, or as I'm reading it, it's all just called Chapter 3.
Yeah.
And I just have to reiterate how beautifully this reads as a 3-chapter book.
It sets up really nicely.
There's not really stopping points mid-chapter. Everything just keeps flowing together. And to the point where you even wonder, where would they have broken this up for single issue? You know, it's such a smooth, coherent story.
Yeah, but, it does seem to work out that way, because obviously it was single issues. This volume being issues 10 to 14, the final 5 of the series. But there is a natural flow, reading either in a trade collection, or as you have it in the complete collection there, where, you can only, if you know the beats of regular comic book storytelling, like you can kind of feel when you're at a closing page, like maybe it's a full page splash or something like that. And the text would indicate that there's maybe a pause. But if you're really engrossed in the story, you're just going to keep flipping those pages and not even see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me just say, I love the conclusion. It's everything. Like, this to me is the comparison I kept thinking of was with Grass Kings, where it's like, okay, it's kind of an isolated world and you got a little bit of a detective story. And then it seems like they kind of got distracted and switched to, in Grass Kings, they switched genre a little bit in the second volume to do a deep dive bio on all the characters. Mm-hmm. And then in volume 3, they kind of ramped it back up for action. Whereas this was like, this felt so consistent all the way through. Like, we know what we're about. We know what this is. We're not scrambling or searching for an identity mid-series. It seems like it was meticulously mapped out. And maybe if it was selling a lot of issues, they could have dragged it out for another 20 or 30 issues. But I just loved the length of it.
Well, see, no, I think they had a lot of things planned out. I do think, so I like how the story ends. And I don't mind the like lack of resolution, I guess, on the main storyline. I like the idea that it ends. I'm okay with the idea that it ends on now we're going to have another adventure. And we don't see that adventure, but we know there's a setup for it, because it sets up basically where they've, Aaliyah and Sam have brought in, and I'm talking specifically about like
the main story. Yeah, no. Yeah, so I'm saying, are you taking that as they are departing so as not to come back?
Oh, no.
Okay, I was like, my understanding is that they're moonlighting doing this.
Yes, yeah.
And the Discovery team is secret, which makes them like scientific vigilantes, basically.
Exactly.
It kind of becomes a superhero-y thing. Well, we put on our costumes at night and we go do the work that needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, and that they would keep doing that. And if the story would continue, then they would be at odds with the council that runs the outpost, So yeah, it would be this like subversive thing. But the idea that the adventure, the mission that Sam and Aaliyah had been on, that they had drugged Liz into, and Mitchell was kind of opposed to all that the thing that they've been focused on when they brought in their parents, when they brought in Karen, and they brought in also, Dennis and Jan, who were part of the original Discovery team, like this had been their job. When they brought them in, they were the ideas and kind of the concepts that they were thinking of were accepted, to the idea where that their parents would now consider and willingly break the rules now and continue exploring. So I don't mind that. I don't need resolution to that. I'm fine with that next chapter being unwritten. I do have a little unease with how pretty much every one of the secondary and tertiary story ends up. And I think that comes down to, I feel it comes down to this book having been canceled probably sooner than they would have wanted. I
mean, like Liz and Mitchell.
Yeah. Like, but also like there are,
because I do think they got a raw deal.
there were unresolved things between Karen and Sam as well. Now that goes away at when she shows up there and she realizes that he calls her mom, and that all disappears. But again, that idea of her having faked infertility, like there's a larger story there,
Yeah.
in terms of how to look into what this society is and how it functions. Obviously, Mitchell and by extension, Mitchell, Maddie, and Liz, all that together there. Like, it felt to me going into it that Liz would go down the road that Maddie is on, and just get hooked on whatever this is. And that had this story gone on, her story would have been one of rehab and recovery, probably, as opposed to just, oh, I did it once, it was great, but I'm not going to do it anymore. Now I'm going to help people. And it's like, wait, like we got there really quickly, like,
yeah. I mean, I like the idea. Well, so I was thinking that they left it with her in a drugged state, like she's hooked now type thing. And I kind of liked that it's like, hey, just because these characters were important to us early on doesn't mean they're all magical heroes. Like, some of them will give in to the inertia of the place around them.
Well, but she ends up being a magical hero because they, the way that she ends up is like, they ask her about it and she admits, yeah, it was great, I loved it. But then she says, oh, but no, what this is this is now a motivating factor. I'm actually going to go into the medical field, which is the thing my parents wanted me to do the whole time, but I was never motivated to do it.
Now, right, yeah, around the lunch table at the end.
Yeah, at the end. So like and to me that feels like, well, we got to wrap things up here. Yeah, we got to wrap things up here. I liked what they started to do with Mitchell, because obviously he was the most resistant because he had
the best development over the full 14 issues. He has, I think, that big line when he, because he is opposed to what Sam and Aaliyah are doing, and then he's like further opposed to it when he sees that they brought Liz into it, and Liz is having those flashbacks of the squid monster thing there, just because she doesn't know what it is, and which is why she goes and gets high anyway down the line. So he is standing in opposition to them in a way, but he does admit that, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says something to the fact of like, you guys are asking questions that I don't think anyone's asked in a long time. And he's like, that's probably dangerous, but at the same time, that's probably a good thing, because there's probably, why haven't, you are looking at things in a different way. And even though he doesn't understand that, he can acknowledge that maybe the way things are isn't the way things have to be. And by them exploring and probing and looking for answers, and just even asking questions, maybe that's a better way forward, or at least a different way forward. So yeah, there is progression there, and I would have liked to have seen more of that. So on a character front, those are the two I think that really got shortchanged, and really felt like they just got just ended because. Yeah, in fact, I would have rather seen them leave us in suspense and say, here's Liz all strung out with Mitch's sister, and Mitch is just sitting in the corner, and they're both left out of the new Discovery team.
Yeah.
And we don't know what would happen. I mean, we've got enough information about them that we could speculate on where they might go, but they're just left in a murky trajectory. Yeah. I find that to be a perfectly acceptable conclusion.
Well, and I think
in an adult story.
Yes. Well, and it would track with how they leave the new Discovery team, which is just, we have formed this new Discovery team and we know what they're going to be looking for, but we have no idea what they're going to find. We have no idea how the rest of the Outpost is going to react. So there's some resolution in terms of where they get to, but nothing what happens next. I agree. It would be fitting if we saw Liz just in a drugged out state. So we know that how she's deciding to cope is a way that other people in the Outpost decide to live their life. That she is now just another person here that maybe is lost in society because of the way that they have the Outpost is set up, that this is an option for people because they see no other way,
right.
And that's a much gloomier and much more of a downer ending, but it would be reflective of kind of the world they had set up there, especially in that first arc when the idea that suicide, specifically teen suicide, is a thing they've dealt with before. Death is obviously something they've dealt with before. The fact that that whatever drug this is that they have, like they make, like this isn't something that they found. Like they
I remember
make it
that conversation,
engineering team,
and I remember thinking like, this is the conversation because they ask like, why are they still making this?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, how come no one in Gotham has ever said like, why are we still making Venom? Like this is or not what's Bane use?
It's Venom. Yeah.
Venom. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just a conversation that in so many other comic books no one ever has. Of like,
well, but that's also
we're making something that's
yeah.
blatantly evil for only one application.
Yeah, but
it's not like this is a helpful drug that's being used in excess, which is like, which would be the comp for like narcotics, in our society, which narcotics are frequently overprescribed, create addictions, create all kinds of problems, but used correctly have their purpose. Whereas it seems like this drug is not like that. Like there's no good minimal use of it.
Maybe not. I mean, I would say
addicted.
Yeah, the idea of like in Gotham or whatever, you're talking about a black market thing. You can always keep doing that. It seems like there is no black market here in the Outpost. It is simply everything's above board. They make it for people. So if you want it, you can go get it. And no one seems to do anything about it. It's almost like you look the other way because everyone knows life's hard out here. And if you want to check out, then you can check out almost. And so, it does seem, again, it just seems like there was a storyline there that could have been followed. And again, I don't want to bring up like teach a lesson about it. Especially when we're talking about a book that is kind of YA focused, but there really was an opportunity there. Like you could teach a lesson about that, right? Had there been more time to explore Maddie and Maddie and Lister. So because you see the state that Maddie is in, and then you could follow Liz and see how she would travel down that same road. And then, I mean, to make the story interesting, you would see then how that story diverges and how she doesn't fall into the same addiction, but maybe, pulls herself out of it. And then also maybe, finds a way to help rehabilitate Maddie as well. And that seems like the kind of storyline you would see, the kind of, character beat you would see in a YA book like that.
Right. Whereas if this were a season of The Wire, she would pull everyone into the drugs and all four of them would just end up strung out at the end of the series.
Yeah. Or Liz would try it 2 or 3 times and like OD and die.
Right.
While Maddie's been on this for like years and is totally, quote unquote, totally fine. It'd be much, much darker and much more grim. But those are just, character moments I think that fell short. And again, I think that's due to the fact that the book was canceled. Not totally abruptly, because I think at the end of issue 13, it does say in the letters section that was the penultimate issue. So they knew going in that 14 was going to be the last one, and they knew that while they were making 13. So I think as you read through, it's
not as abrupt as a book like Royal City. For the penultimate issue, we did not know that the next one was the last.
So
we just found that we just showed up at the comic shop. It was $1 extra because it was an oversized book. And it was like, by the way, we're wrapping this whole book right now.
Well, that was Lemire making a choice on his own. I mean, because at this point, even then, I don't think Image was at a point with him where they could be like, well, we're going to stop this. If he wanted to stop it, they were going to stop it. So Outpost Zero, they didn't get the fully abrupt ending, but it was abbreviated. Maybe it almost feels like maybe as they were making issue like 12, they probably got the news and that they only had 2 issues left. And I think you can see that in some of and how things start wrapping up. But
how
the story accelerates.
Like we're complaining about Liz and Mitchell.
Yeah.
But I think more characters have a satisfying ending than don't. I think the doctor who's on his deathbed the whole time we know him has a beautiful ending. Karen has a great ending. Aaliyah's parents have a great ending. Aaliyah and Sam have a great ending, and Steven has a great ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
that's a lot of good endings for a book that, finished a bit prematurely. And
Oh, and I
to
agree.
me,
Yeah, I agree there.
Aaliyah's parents stole the show in this volume.
Yeah. Well, they
Which
definitely
having good parents kind of pushes against, like, yeah, they clearly weren't
a lot
writing
of well,
directly for a YA audience
yeah,
at the time.
yeah, yeah.
Because the parents are never the heroes in a YA book.
Yeah. They're the ones that have to learn the lessons too. And no, yeah. I mean, Jan and Dennis, they have they embody, like, through and through, like to the bone, the kind of the ethos of what I think the book is trying to get across, which is that tension between, like, are you living just to survive? Like, are you living just to live, or there's something to live for? Because of their attachment and their jobs on the Discovery team, they are naturally curious, and they pass that down to their daughter. And Aaliyah is naturally curious, and they understand the importance of that, and they nurtured that, and let that grow in her. And yeah, no, I think they, and especially as more and more is revealed about the Outpost and the history of the Outpost, and the way that the governing council treats innovation and discovery, like they have like a public display as they destroy the drill, the super advanced drill that the Discovery team uses, except no one really knows how to use, because no one has the institutional knowledge to fix it or anything like that. But, like, they make a big spectacle,
which is a little bit of an Idiocracy vibe. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
It especially in this volume, I got really strong vibes from The Village, the M. Night Shyamalan movie. Did you see that one?
I have, and I liked it more than most people did.
Yeah, I didn't think it was great, but it's the idea of, like, we are going to deliberately hinder and discourage technological advancement. Like, we're going to live in the past because we feel either it's safer or it's more controllable. Whatever it is, we're rejecting modernity because
in The Village, it was all people who had been traumatized by something, and apparently that whole thing was a ripoff of a Twilight Zone episode. Literally the same plot beats. Now I've got a literary comp.
It's a common trope there, but I think what I'm saying here is that Aaliyah's parents are put in, I guess, a kind of a higher pedestal when you put them against the council, and because the more we learn about them, and we see that, I think we talked about it last week, this idea of they're trying to restrict innovation and knowledge. And it's going on so long at the Outpost, over 200 years, that the people in charge may not even know why. Like, I don't know if Arturo and other people who are on the council, if they even know what Sam and Aaliyah found about the GenShip project and all that, the Ancestry project and all that. I don't even know if they know it's down there. They just know you don't go down there because that's what was told to them.
Right.
I don't think
and it's that scarcity mentality. It's like, this is what's been told to us.
Yes,
we've obeyed it, and we're still alive. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
And then this beautiful page.
They still work against innovation. So.
Oh yeah. The beautiful page that I called to your attention in the complete edition is page 262.
Yeah.
But
it's issue 12. I think it's page 16 in issue 12, so it's right in the middle of the issue.
Yeah, and he says, how can we not see it, Jan? I knew what we do is unpopular. People are so focused on surviving that the idea of risk is madness to them. But what are we surviving for? What kind of species would build ships and travel through space just to give up? Our ancestors built a way of life here on a foundation of fear. It makes sense that most of us shy away from risk still. So this is a conversation. I'm not doing voices. This is why I don't do audiobooks.
Yeah,
but I don't record them. I listen to a lot of them, but
and that was a conversation between Jan and Dennis, who are Leah's parents, and
who have just been flogged.
They tried to. So one of the things that we didn't really touch on, because it's not super. It is kind of, it's not important at the time. Was that back in the first volume, right before the giant ice storm hits, that takes up the bulk of the story in volume 1 and 2. Right before that, one of their sensors picked up something that could be defined as life outside the dome. And through the process of breaking through the ice and they find the sensor, and when they bring it back inside and they realize that they've potentially discovered, existing life on the planet, they decide to, hey, we're going to make a big public statement about this, and that'll get everyone excited about the Discovery team and what we could do and the possibilities. And instead, everyone freaks out. Like, wait, you did what? You found what out there, and you brought it back inside? You don't even know what it is,
right?
And yeah, so they're a little naive, little short-sighted in terms of people, and this is everyone, not just the council. This is everyone in the Outpost in terms of their acceptance of the potential for discovery out there, and that's what Dennis is kind of lamenting, being like, yeah, really kind of screwed that one up, didn't it? Like, maybe a little more thought, we could have seen, we could have predicted what the reaction would have been.
It's kind of classic scientist, and that reminds me of, what was that OGN that I had you read from Mad Cave, the Carmen line?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Very similar vibe there, which is an OGN that I'd still like to probably touch on in a one shot at some point. But the big literary comp for me, and I'm wondering if you ever read this, was An Enemy of the People by Henrik Ibsen.
No.
Okay, one of the foremost playwrights of the 19th century.
Yeah, I know who Ibsen is, and I haven't read that though.
Okay, so it's a play. The whole thing's maybe 80 pages. The basic premise of this is Dr. Stockman is a scientist who discovers an unpalatable truth about some bathhouses they want to build. The public is all for having these bathhouses. He's like, that's right next to the sewage drainage. You don't want to do that. People are going to die. Yeah. And the powers that be are like, well, we already have plans for this, and so's on the council, and he's the contractor that's going to build it. So let's just make Dr. Stockman look crazy. And it's a 5-act play where he is driven mad because he does not know how to work the public, even though he has the truth on his side. And
there's a relevant theme for our days.
There's a couple great quotes from it. He says, "The majority is never right. Never, I tell you. That's one of these lies in society that no free and intelligent man can help rebelling against. Who are the people that make up the biggest portion of the population? The intelligent ones or the fools?" And perhaps the best one that I should maybe have on a t-shirt is, you should never wear your best trousers when you go out to fight for freedom and truth. Or public opinion is an extremely mutable thing. Yeah. The most dangerous enemy of the truth and freedom amongst us is the compact majority. And at the end, he resolves to say that he is the strongest man in the world because he's the one who's able to stand alone, which I think is actually a very similar vibe. So anyway, I was getting a lot of vibe checks from that. I don't know if they had read, if they were deep in Norwegian plays when they were writing this, but it's an evergreen theme.
Oh yeah,
and it's one that every person now on Twitter or social media thinks that the problem is now everyone thinks they're speaking against the majority.
Yeah.
Regardless of their opinion. You had people storming the Capitol on January 6th feel like they're fighting the majority.
Yeah.
And people pushing against them feel like they're fighting the majority.
Yeah.
But yeah, one last great quote. He says, "The idol of authority must be shattered in this town."
Well, then I think that's super relevant to this.
They're all so on
the
nose. It's it's crazy.
Well, I said it is a common trope. The idea of a small group of people have found, we'll call it the truth, quote unquote, like an objective truth, and they are persecuted against because the people in charge may or may not know what that truth is, but they don't really care because they know the existence of that truth threatens their power. And I think that's how we're supposed to view the council here. That I don't think the council knows. Again, the way I read it was they don't know that the history of the Outpost any more than anybody else. Like, I don't think they know that the gen ship that crashed here did so because it was sabotaged by a group of people on that ship.
Oh my gosh, yeah, obviously
Yeah,
not.
that they were that a group of basically doomsayers, like total fatalists, said, like, on this trip decided it wasn't worth living, it wasn't worth exploring, it wasn't worth doing anything, and that's why they crash landed here, because they sabotaged the engines. I don't think the people in the council now know that, and I don't think they're trying to keep that hidden. I think that information slowly died out over the generations, and then as it went along, it was just those in power just kept doing the same thing, because, as you said, it's about stasis. It was like, we've survived this long doing it this way, so we're going to keep doing it. So no one is allowed to dig any further.
In many fronts, it's a sympathetic way to, like, let's say we had a character who we actually followed and were attached to, that felt like, I know what Discovery's doing is really important, but you just don't see what you're gambling. Or perhaps if they had a village elder who's like, I used to be on the Discovery team, and when I was on the Discovery team, we brought back something from the outside that had a bacteria and it killed half the colony. And I got to tell you, like, it seems like an abundance of caution on my part, from where you're standing, but from where I'm standing, this is a perfectly reasonable position, because we already did what you're talking about and we almost lost everything. If you had a more sympathetic conservative character, that would have been, maybe that's something you could have done with a longer series.
And part of me feels like that's what they were trying to set up with Mitchell, and of course in this series, all the main point of views are going to be coming from the younger characters. Obviously, that they could have done that with an older character in opposition to Dennis and Jan, on the actual Discovery team. I feel like they were maybe trying to set that up with Mitchell and have him be in opposition, again, kind of in quotes, opposition to Sam and Aaliyah, because we see them where he's the one who sees things through the lens of everything everyone does has to be for the benefit of the whole outpost, of everyone here, which is
hilarious when you do the fighting.
Well, but I think, but
entertainment is value. Like, no arguing that, but it seems less essential.
And the fact that he grew up, his parents were farmers, and so they're the ones making food and all that. And he experiences his mother's suicide, and we understand why his reaction to Steven is so violent, because he feels that's giving up. That is letting down. You're being selfish because you're putting yourself above everybody else. And to him, the survival of everybody is the thing that's most important. And so I feel like they were maybe trying to set him up in that spot that you're talking about. But instead they kind of run out of time. And so the council, the ones that are actively trying to stifle advancement and innovation just become kind of the villains. And that's a storyline that it's kind of another storyline that I think I would have liked to have seen more of. And now that the way you describe that kind of older character, like that, so someone like someone like the former doctor, someone like that, who was kind of
someone who's I really understand our protagonists, and I'm for you guys, but you gotta pump the brakes.
They've aged out of, I guess, being a actively contributing member to society, because the idea that someone who's still around, but I think part of that though is I like that addition, and I like where that story could have gone, but it does seem to fly a little bit in the face.
I don't try to rewrite every book we read.
Oh, I know.
I was thinking about the nightly news and how I was like, man, if it had just started all from the vantage point of the journalist going undercover, that would have taken that book up, to another level. But this one feels like they probably would have done that if it was a longer run.
Yeah, I think that there are things that, again, I feel there's a shift in the middle of this volume, because they knew they had to wrap things up. But there's a lot of things that were set up that I think were really interesting. And again, the idea that exploring this idea of this repressed institutional knowledge is something that is very interesting to me, and the thing I would have liked to seen probably more of, because again, I reading it as an adult reader, that's the thing that I think would interest me more. I could see maybe from a younger audience standpoint, wanting to know more about the characters and their journeys. And gosh, we've gone this far, and we haven't even talked about like the giant squid that digitizes people.
Well, now that's the interesting thing that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
Because I have this, plucky, upbeat, optimistic attitude that Aaliyah and Sam have. And I'm assuming like this is their reward for their belief, and this is all good. This is not a malicious or deceptive monster.
Yes, I agree
but
with
it
that.
could be.
Yes.
They have not closed the door on that.
No, they have not. But I think the reader's understanding is supposed to be that this thing is on our side, that this thing is trying to help people and is trying to help the Outpost.
Well, and I think the next, like the most interesting next thing for me would have been like, what if this went 15 more issues? It goes another year and a half or so, and it turns out there is no way for humans to ever survive on this planet. This, the squids and the monsters are all that there can be. However, they can absorb human consciousness.
Yeah.
And the true sci-fi ending is that survival means transhumanism. It's like, humans get to live, but without a body. Like, their consciousness goes on, they're thinking, they're thinking and their discovery and everything else goes on, but their brains are downloaded. It's kind of like the Matrix or something like that, where they still get to live out reality. But, the Matrix being sinister, like that was made as a playground to keep humans busy because they were enslaved. Yeah. This being the positive version of that. And I think that's a really fascinating direction that in my mind, like that's kind of where it goes. Like this planet is not going to unfreeze in time for people to live there.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and again, they're only here, like they didn't choose to be here. But that's the thing, though. The Outpost doesn't know that. You go back to that. The page you were quoting between Dennis and Jan. The idea of our ancestors didn't build these ships to come out here and leave and explore. But they didn't mean to end up on this planet. They weren't trying to end up here, and the fact that early in this arc, when Sam and Aaliyah are talking to the robot, like they don't know what Earth is. They know Earth as dirt and ground. They don't know Earth, proper noun Earth. They don't know where they came from. They don't know how they ended up here. Like that's not being taught. They don't know, like they have their own calendar system, so when the Outpost was set up after that gen ship crashed, like they scrapped everything. They didn't tell anybody nothing. And, as the new generations came through, they made sure to repress all of that knowledge. And so they don't have any of that understanding of why they're even there. And so I think it is super interesting to think that the future would be them having to realize that they're a mistake, I guess.
Oh yeah.
And that the only way out would be, transcending into whatever this digital neural network the squid has.
By the way, did you interpret Sam's actions at the lunch table that he actually did what the hologram said and destroyed that room? Because he has a look. He's looking now. This is one.
Yeah.
If we get to talk to the artist, we get to hear directly from the artist why he's looking all shifty-eyed away as he says, "Oh no, maybe okay, let's see." No, I pulled it up. She says, "Sorry, you're probably still upset that the comms room you found was all wrecked," which it wasn't all wrecked when he found it. But meaning she has now seen it and it is wrecked. He says,
no.
He's looking away. It says, I guess I'll just have to keep on the hunt for working terminals.
No.
Is that or he's just hiding the secret?
I read that as Sam told her the room was wrecked.
Yes. Oh, okay. So he didn't actually wreck it.
Yeah. I read that as he obviously went there. He saw,
and he didn't want her to hear something that poisonous or cynical.
Well, yeah.
which I definitely
but
agree with.
he
Which
wanted
means
to
he
keep.
did agree with the people in the video who said, like, you know, whether he actually physically destroys the machine or he destroys the message that comes from the machine is effectively the same thing.
Yeah, the end result is because he understands the idea that the power it could have. But no, I read it. I read that as he lied about it and is keeping that there with the idea that eventually the truth would come out. I think that's
right. Maybe he'll leave it open for someone else to have the choice,
or the idea of revealing this information, unlike the approach that Jen and Dennis took of just blurring it out and being like, hey, look what we found, isn't this great, everybody got on board. The idea of maybe slow playing it a little bit, working it in phases and understanding how to work the people and to get them on their side, and the idea that the more information they find, the slower they can bring people along to get them acclimated, and then slowly reveal all this history. That's the way that I read it, and that he did not want it to destroy the history. He is still, obfuscating it a little bit. He's still hiding it a little bit, but I don't think he was capable of eliminating it and letting that secret die with him. I think he's just preparing and biding his time, waiting, in issue, hypothetical issue 20 or 21 or 22, something like that down the line to reveal this information to the greater public.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I just saw his eyes are looking left, which is the blatant sign of lying.
Yes. Yeah.
He's covering something. So I didn't know if he was covering that. Yes, it is destroyed, but it wasn't destroyed when I found it, or no, it's not actually destroyed. I just told you it was because I don't think you're ready to hear what was in there.
Yes. I don't think he thinks anybody is, but again, I don't believe Sam is the person who would hold on to that forever. They're going to keep discovering, but he knows that history is important to share at some point. He just haven't gotten there. But again, that's like a separate track to follow down versus the Steven track, which is the idea of it doesn't really matter where we started from. You being here is unsustainable, even though you've done it for 200 some odd years.
Right?
It's the idea that and it's weird too, because so Sam sees his parents, which are just like residual images of them right before they died.
Right.
But then there's Steven, who I guess because he went to the squid when he was alive, like he is fully sentient. And I have so many questions about what that is. And
where
what that
is Steven's body? Is it gone? Yeah. And that's what really had me thinking about the transhumanism thing.
Or is he just still plugged in, quote unquote, to the squid?
Right.
Like is he just encased somewhere like in a pod, exactly like the Matrix? And said, I don't know. And it's for me, that's the thing that is most interesting that's left hanging in terms of what the story could be about. Because the idea that the Outpost may have to give up on the Outpost for them to live eternally. I don't know. How does that work? Can it continue? Are they living there forever? Or do they generate more people? Do they age? There are so many questions.
Do these squids
die
thousands of years? Or I mean, are they the apex predator? If not,
also,
is there an apex predator I can store my brain in?
Also, you talked about squids plural. Are there more than one? Or is it just the one?
Yeah, right. Is it just the one squid that inhabits? Now, there's more than one creature, right? Like there's a big fish-looking thing.
You would think,
well.
yeah. So, who knows? And said these are the things that I would have liked answered if the story went further. But
I also love that I have a thing to chew on. I'm like,
that's true. That's true.
I hate when I don't like when a story stays too long, and it answers every possible question you could have in an encyclopedic fashion, to the point where you're like, why is this still going? It's just to answer questions.
Well, yeah, and I'm with you on that, but I think in this case, this isn't about answering every question. It's about we put something out there that it clearly seemed like they were going to follow down. That they were going to explore these weren't questions they threw out there for nothing, that they had a plan of where this wanted to go. It seems that way to me. And they ran out of time and issues to get there. And so, but again,
and by the way, the thing that I praised us for last issue continues. We don't do a stalling for time, drop back in time issue.
yes.
And the one that occurred to me here is that if you said, hey, we're going to wrap it up at 14, and Image said, it'd be really great if you could get to 15, for whatever reason. Like that way we could do, 3 trades of 5 issues or what, whatever. Some stupid marketing reason. They would say, okay, well, right between 13 and 15, then we're going to drop in a one-shot issue that is Otto's backstory with the original crew.
Oh, yeah.
And we get to witness the whole meltdown from Otto's perspective, which would be like an interesting issue. But to me, it would feel like it's when my pet peeve is not getting more information. I love that. And I actually would have really enjoyed the issue I just described. My issue is when you do a really short setup for a really quick payoff. When it's like, oh, let's show the whole Otto backstory so that in the 14th issue, we can kind of literally Deus Ex Machina, because it's from Otto.
Yeah.
We can have some insight from the original crew drop on our heroes, and it means more to us than it does our heroes because we saw this thing last issue.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because we the reader have more information than the characters do.
Right. Yeah. For some reason, whatever, if the Otto issue had been the very first issue of the series and the payoff comes at the end of 15, that feels totally different to me than doing a setup one issue and then paying it off the very next issue.
Yeah. I agree with that. If the book had started, that's interesting, actually. If the book had started with
the crash landing, and then
with the crash landing,
jump 2,000 years to the future at the end of issue 1, you'd be like, what?
200 years. Yeah. But yeah. But if it were 18 pages of the original Gen ship crashing and them setting up, and then the final 4 pages were 220 years later, and all these brand new characters are there, and then then it's almost like the girl that's in the hologram that Sam is kind of obsessed over, the one where we see she's talking about, it seems very hopeful, again, she's the one that's quoted about, I wish you could have seen all the alien things and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
If you're watching this, I guess you're the lucky ones. And that's where it cuts off. And then when Sam finds the full recording, like, she's basically like, and you don't deserve it. Everyone's supposed to die. Like, this is terrible.
That was a brutal twist.
Yeah. There's so much bile and venom there. But it would be the kind of thing where she would have been one of the characters we saw, and maybe we don't see what side she's on or anything like that. And then
you get this great reveal. Yeah.
The coda at the end, those last couple pages in that first issue, is Sam finding her hologram. And so now we, the reader, know who she is. And then we understand what kind of journey they're going to go on, because now Sam's going to go on the journey to fill in the gaps that we, the reader, also have, because all we've seen is them crash landing and all that stuff. We don't see the specifics. And I think that's a way they could have told the story. But then again, I think that then makes your story about the history and foundation and founding of the outpost,
Right. Well, it would make it about kind of this eternal quest for the eternal tension between people who are just trying to survive and people who are trying to move forward and discover.
Yes. Yeah.
But they get there anyway. I mean,
they do. But that isn't what the book is really about. I think the book is it doesn't have that lofty of a theme. It is more. It's a kid's coming of age story. It's an adventure story. It's about innovation,
right?
And discovery. And it's not about the specific history of this outpost. And I think if you started the book with that flashback, or if they had used flashbacks, that's a signal to the reader that the specific history of this outpost is important, of the people that came before, who founded it because of whatever, like, doomsday cult that formed on the original ship. That's the most important thing, and how that history is being suppressed and how it has led to the side we have now. It shifts the focus it it shifts the focus towards just a different target that I don't think this book is actually about. And so I'm glad it's not there, even though I'm with you. I would love that story. I find that stuff interesting because I want to know more about just the world that we're in. But that isn't the story they're trying to tell here. And if it had been that story, I don't think it would have been as conducive. I don't think it would have been as conducive as a YA story as it's marketed now.
I agree. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I think the great way to contrast it would be, I think I said at the beginning of the series, if you ever wanted to return to this world, you wouldn't return to Outpost Zero. You would go to Outpost 47.
Yes.
And it's like,
yeah.
here's a ship that's scattershot another direction. And perhaps this is a ship full of the plucky, optimistic people. There was not a rebellion on the ship, and there wasn't all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they land on a horrifying planet that really challenges their optimism.
Yeah,
and pushes them to the more conservative approach. And then we realize, like, oh, the people at Outpost Zero, had they landed on this other planet, they would have been better equipped for it than the people that did land there. And you build an interesting contrast, and you get to see the full spectrum, and everyone, wherever they are, gets challenged.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, we find out that what it was Gen Ship 08. I think that was the one that crash landed here. So that would at least presume the existence of Gen Ships 01 through 07. And who knows, maybe even further than that. But if you've got one that's 8, there's probably at least 7 that came before. So yeah, what happened to them? Where did they go? I'm with you. That would be interesting. You go to a different world with a different type of people. Maybe they don't have rebellion there. They land and they do the thing that they were allegedly planned to do. Right. Whatever exploration.
But then they get into a kind of alien scenario. Alien, Prometheus, anything from that franchise where it's there's this bold colonization, and we're just prey as soon as we land.
We think we're in charge here, and only to find out, no, not so much. So no, I agree. I think I think it shows though that this concept that we discussed, early on. This last arc of humanity, this generational ship, this idea of leaving a doomed planet to go colonize and explore out into the world, I guess in this case, outer world, out into space. It's such a malleable concept that you can approach it in so many different ways, but they're all really the same way,
Yes, they're all about.
You can tell endless stories, and go in so many different directions. You can focus on the characters, you can focus on the alien world, you can make it an allegory for our current day world. It can be a YA story, it can be like hard sci-fi, it can end up being like hard fantasy. It can transcend genre. It just from the idea of Earth is dying and we have to go somewhere else,
Yeah. Now, I think the thing where like hard sci-fi loses me is when, for whatever reason, they get so like, if you had 10 straight issues just talking about how the engineering system worked, on this planet, that to me would be a waste of ink and time. And it's like, you're not really understanding what the appeal of the thing you have is.
Well, but that would be a bad choice for that kind of story in a comic setting. But you could absolutely get away with that in a novel. In a prose novel, you could have a whole chapter,
It's still boring to me when people do that, but you can get away with it. And to me, the point of sci-fi is to comment on these other things.
Yeah, I'm on the same side. That's boring to me too. But there are writers that would do that because that's interesting to them. That they want to be able to explain
I'm just
everything.
Saying,
how does this work? So
foundationally, the genre is about allegory. And when you get lost in the allegorical world and you're no longer making an allegory, you're just exploring the allegorical world. To me, it seems like you've really missed the purpose.
I tend to,
but then it becomes its own new genre, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, I'm kind of a classic sci-fi guy. I don't need every question answered. I don't need Star Trek. Like early Star Trek was really the sweet spot for me, where it was like, yeah, you just have to suspend belief about
you just
a
accept
great
these things
number of
exist.
things,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
um
You don't have to
and
know how the Federation exists and what's super important. Like, how does everything on the ship work? Now, we'll get there eventually. People will figure that stuff out, but you're not going to spend time to be
right, because
like,
it would just
yeah,
not make good
yeah,
stories. But
yeah. What's the
yeah,
tax
speaking of
policy
Star
of the
Trek, right?
Federation? That
What's
kind
the
of thing. Yeah, that's the
right,
George
like,
R. R. Martin thing, right?
oh
Yeah.
my, yeah, we're like, where's
What's
where
Aragorn's
does
tax policy?
where's their toilets drained to? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
come
yeah,
on, man.
yeah.
That the people of Outpost Zero, the majority of them,
What is
perhaps,
their tax policy?
well, they could have been the best crew ever for Star Trek because they're all about staying within the parameters of the Prime Directive.
Yeah. Oh,
But
yes.
all
Yeah.
good Star Trek stories are looking at the Prime Directive and throwing it right out the window.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and saying, and so it's like, yeah, we've got
Kirk's not a character if you're not breaking the Prime Directive.
right, and Aaliyah is our Kirk, right? It's
Yeah.
and the town is our, I don't know. It's not nice to say Spock because Spock always gets on board with breaking the Prime Directive eventually.
Yeah, but Spock is the person who's initially resistive and then joins up, you know. So, but no, yeah, there is. That's a fun comp to think about now. This the idea that this would be, this is almost like if our Star Trek crew had gotten marooned and stuck on a planet,
Right. What's the organization that sends out the Starfleet? It's like if Starfleet got everything they ever wanted.
Yeah.
What a boring story.
Yeah. We're done with it. We're no longer exploring that. Now we're colonizing and terraforming.
See, now I want to write a satirical, like, Star Trek comic where we have the most obedient, submissive crew ever, and we see just how damn boring it is. For everyone to like play by the rules and only explore up to a certain point and not intervene and not interfere, even when they see atrocities happening.
And all they do is complain about the Enterprise crew because like they're making everyone look bad because like they keep breaking the rules and getting away with it. And it's like the rest of us
stealing all the headlines, and they're like, we found a really interesting bacteria last month, but they saved a civilization.
I know, yeah.
By breaking the Prime Directive.
Exactly, yeah. We're doing everything by the book, and we're right, and we just keep getting looked over. That'd be good. That'd be good.
Yeah, I love this. Oh my
no
gosh.
free ideas though. Yeah, no free ideas. Hold on to that one.
Yeah, I've given away too many book ideas here, and if I had the discipline to write anything, well, first of all, if I had a discipline to do it, I would have written it already. Yeah. Which is a realization you have in your mid to late 30s. I'm like, man, I would love to write a comic book. If I had it in me to do it, wouldn't I have done it by now?
Yeah, maybe not. You never know. Never too late to start.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've started. I've just never finished. I've started many, many times.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
The finishing is the sticking point, which I think most writers will tell you.
Yeah.
Is always the hardest part. Yeah, and I'm always baffled by comic artists that I follow who are extremely active on Twitter. I'm like, when do you write things? You're just trolling people all day long on Twitter. I think one of my favorite artists in particular is a very active Twitter troll. But anyway,
anyway,
Outpost Zero.
Yeah.
To me, this, even though we have the truncated, somewhat abrupt ending, this is still a 5 out of 5 star comic ending for me. Like it was everything it needed to be. It's not everything other books were trying to be.
Yeah.
It's not the summa achievement of anything, but it's the best version of itself. It's the great conclusion. Maybe 4.5 stars because we ding, a couple points for the rushed Mitchell and Liz stories, but
and I think
they figured out soon, in enough time, that they were ending, and they ended it in a satisfying way that still gives me plenty to chew on.
Well, and I think too, there is an argument to be made. Again, going back to the idea of how this book is being marketed now, that it is now going to be considered from here on out a YA story and a YA comic, and I don't recall it being that way when it first came out in a single issue or when the trades were coming out. But now in that complete edition, it's going to be looked at and viewed that way. So how does the story work from that perspective? Is it a satisfying ending for that? Because again, for me as an older reader looking at this, like those weird sci-fi questions, the history stuff. That's what I'm most curious about. But like to a teen reader, is that going to feel like, are they going to care about that? Are those kind of the things that we see as loose ends? Are they going to be perceived as loose ends? Because is a 15-year-old kid who's reading this, who has some connection or identifies in some way with one or a number of these kids, are they going to find that conclusion satisfying? And I think the answer there is potentially yes. We may find what Lys's story to be truncated and kind of rushed, but to a kid reading that, maybe not. They're going to see her experience and see where she ends up and what she resolves to do as being as coming to a better understanding of that, seeing that and finding that satisfying.
Yeah, and it could just as easily be that what someone would take away from that is, oh, this character had deeper roots than I realized. Like, they were a little more tethered. They were just trying to get over one particular instance of trauma.
Yeah.
They weren't so deeply flawed and would, because she was like, prior to seeing the monster, Lys was a character who was like pretty self-assured, pretty comfortable in the colony.
Yep. Pretty happy-go-lucky. Yeah, right. Yeah, definitely.
Got her little iPod and, her skates and was great. Yep. It was like, I'm good to go. All I want is to get back to that. She didn't have the great ambition of like, I want to go out into the frost.
Yeah.
So it's
she didn't even have the ambition of like at what her parents wanted to do, which is go into the medical team. She was like, yeah, I'll be on services because I don't really have anything.
Right. But she was like
herself as having
relatively healthy and well-adjusted, good self-esteem, pretty easy to please.
Yeah.
And it's very different than if a deeply wounded, flawed, already contemplating suicide character had then experienced something traumatic. It's like that takes a lot more time to come back from, which you just wonder what Mitch's sister went through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you see that. I think you see that in Sam, because Sam had in this arc admits that he had he suffers from depression. That he had suicidal thoughts and things like that. But he didn't have he didn't see the giant squid in the same sort of traumatic way that Lys did. Maybe because he was already down in a bad way, almost like he was accepting potential fate. Like he's already in this headspace of potentially taking his own life, and then he first sees this giant squid monster outside, and his first thoughts are like, well, I guess it's time, as opposed to Lys, who is kind of maybe it's a veneer, but has a super positive outlook, and having her world completely interrupted by seeing this alien thing totally messes with and so that's when, again, the way that I read it is saying, well, I want to see that journey down and then that journey back up. But to a younger reader, they may not need that full kind of arc, that they may see that as being a satisfying conclusion, because she resolves to do better. She gets to that magical place of, I took whatever drugs they were and they made me feel great, but I understand that they're not, that's no way to live. So now I'm going to refocus myself. I'm actually going to apply myself and quote unquote make something of myself now and go into the medical team and all that.
Well, in her sunny disposition, I'm trying to remember the term for it. In the book Low by Rick Remender, which I know I've talked about before, it's similar to this, except if they'd never escaped Earth. They just have to go underneath the Earth's surface to survive the elements. And it's this hopeless scenario, and people are given into all kinds of hopeless, nihilistic behavior. And quantumology, that's the word, which is that by assuming a positive mindset, you can actually manifest positive things.
Isn't that just The Secret?
What is The Secret?
Oh, that self-help book? It's
probably. Right. So like a lot of the rhetoric in Low reads like a self-help book, but to me, that's how the character lists. So like people who are that determinately upbeat and optimistic It's like, yeah, she can make service team work because she's she's determined to enjoy herself
Yeah.
and enjoy her life wherever she is.
Yeah.
People like me are determined in the complete opposite direction. And I
Make
can
things harder on yourself. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like, you could like give me a free vacation to anywhere right now, and I would think of 9 reasons that it'll make me miserable. Um, it's just how I'm wired. And yeah, so I do envy that, but I mock it and envy it at the same time. I'm like, man, I wish it was that easy for me to just switch on positive thinking and have it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But some people have that capacity, and very frequently it does create better results for them.
Yeah. Yeah. But there is a sense, I think, for other people more geared like you and I to think of like, well, you're intentionally living in a not real world.
Yes.
Like this isn't reality.
Right.
You're deluding yourself. And maybe that's just our own anxieties and
I think the
fears
wise quantumologists, or whether they call themselves that or not, would come back and say, you're also living in a warped world, warped by negativity.
Yeah, it's not as bad as you think it is. Yeah.
You know, it might be historically based for you, but that's not necessarily predictive of the future.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so and I think I probably had a therapist say that to me, you know, that like
it sounds very therapist. Yeah.
Yeah. That just because you know, just because other people are naive for being optimistic doesn't mean being optimistic is inherently naive.
Yes. Yeah.
And
that you're somehow more knowing because you aren't that way and you call them out on it.
Right. Which is the great comfort blanket that cynicism offers, is that
yes. Yeah.
And I think I've probably quoted this before, but the optimist thinks everything good except the pessimist, and the pessimist thinks everything bad except himself.
Yeah.
I think G.K. Chesterton. Yeah.
That's very much apt. And you know, you have to think that that's a push and pull that exists in a place like Outpost Zero, you know,
right?
When you
it's basically, the cynic would say, look, here are the facts.
Yeah.
We are in a finite bubble.
Yeah.
In an infinite frost.
Yeah.
And like, we have no way to terraform this planet. We have no way off of this planet.
Yeah.
Our days are numbered, and we don't even really know. And any storm could come break the bubble faster than we think it could. Yeah. Which, by the way, was interesting that existential threat was posed and resolved without it really impacting the story. If that had been lifted, would it have made a difference other than like helping us feel acquainted with how fragile their lives are?
I think that was it's all about the kind of story that maybe the reader is expecting versus the one they're actually telling, you know? Okay, and I think,
and I don't have a problem with it, to be clear.
I
thought it was valuable.
I think initially you would think that, oh, it's a story about survival and what's going to happen here. And it's actually not about that. It's actually about, that's just a problem for them to solve. And it's basically, how do they deal with problems as a society, as this outpost, this colony? How do they come together and make decisions about the future? And it's almost more about a bureaucratic sense than the actual threat of the ice breaking the dome. It's more just, how do we solve problems when they happen? How do we deal with things? How do we survive? Not this specific thing, just in general, because that became the theme for the whole book. But yeah, no, I'm with you. It seemed like it would be a bigger deal where that larger threat was something that would hang over it. But again, that wasn't the story they were trying to tell. And us as the reader have to recognize.
Yeah. But anyway, a great book. Yeah, I'll stick with 4.5 stars for this one. And there was no weak point lull in this series, which I think that's the advantage of keeping it tight.
And I think I'd probably put it at like a 4. I'd put it at a 4 for that reason. There was nothing extraneous. There are things that are left unresolved. Some that I don't mind, some that I do mind, which I think is the score that I have. Why it's a 4. The reason it's not a 3.5 for me, I think, because I like the efficient storytelling. We kept talking about the idea of they didn't use some of those storytelling crutches like flashbacks and narration boxes and things like that. There's no one narrating the story from an omniscient or semi-omniscient point of view. We're learning everything as our main characters are learning them. We're getting the same information that they have. We're not ahead of them. They're not withholding things from us for the most part. And so I like the efficiency of the story, even though we don't get to what I believe is the actual full end that they wanted to get to. So yeah, I think that's why I put it at a 4, a little bit lower than you, but it's a book that I enjoy. Again, I think it's a book that I can just flip through and not read. Nothing against Sean Kelly McKeever, but I love Alexander Tefengi's art so much. I love his character design. There's a cleanliness to his style that appeals to me, and artists that are like him that work in that similar-ish vein that I would probably group in a like manner. So I love his art, and it's a book I can revisit for that, because I like to see what he has done just on the page. I think it's cool to look at.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of the recurring themes of our podcast is a lot of times the benchmark for you of a book we select is one that you're willing to return to even without having to reread it.
Yes.
If you're willing, if it brings you joy to pull out the issues and flip through them and, relive the moments.
Yeah. And sometimes that's rereading every word again. And sometimes that's ignoring the words and just looking at the art. Sometimes it's both. Yeah. For me, that's the benchmark of a quality book, one that I'm going to go back to, and I'm always going to have on hand, because at some point I'll just feel an urge and a drive to be like, I'm going to pull that back out again. I'm going to go through that again because I liked what that experience was. That was a worthwhile experience.
Yeah. Well, that is all I have to say about this book. Can't recommend it enough. Obviously, if you're at the end of this episode, hopefully you've read the whole thing and you agree. But this is a great one now in the complete collection, $17.99. I mean, there is no better deal in comics than $18 for 14 issues. And I think this is a great gift. The size of it, I think, is not daunting to a non-comic reader. This is absolutely a book I would recommend to someone who has never read a comic or someone who's never read a non-superhero comic. I think the storytelling is clean and straightforward. The characters are compelling and interesting, and it doesn't go on forever and ever like some.
And I think definitely if you have a younger reader in your life, someone in that early teen range who may or may be interested in reading comics, maybe someone who is already reading comics, but maybe they focus mostly on manga, or they only have superhero reading. Maybe they
right. And I think
the Marvel
is
movies and they want that. This is
a little more substantial.
Yeah, but
substance wise, while still being just as entertaining. It
could be a gateway. Like if you've got a 12, 13-year-old kid who's super into the Marvel comics or DC or whatnot, they're only reading superhero stuff, I think a book like this could be a good gateway into the non-superhero world. And you mentioned that as well for an older reader. I think for that YA audience, that middle grade audience, I think this is a kind of book that they can be presented and they can help onboard them into other types of comic storytelling, other types of characters, other types of environments, other types of worlds, other types of themes that they can start addressing and know that there's more stories out there in the comic form that they could be reading and they could be introduced to. I think it's a book that works great for that.
Yeah. Basically, we can't recommend it any more highly than we already have. And hopefully you can recommend it to people. I think it's a great gift to buy. Under $20, even a white elephant at Christmas. $20 limit. Never know what to buy. Buy them a comic book and stick a little note in there that says, listen to the Storied Arcs podcast as you go. So anyway, thank you for listening. Please like and share with a friend, not just the books, but the podcast. And you can find us, as always, on Twitter at Storied Arcs, Instagram at Storied Arcs, and as always at storiedarcs.com. And we will see you next time for our next book and perhaps even a special interview to follow up this series. Still in the works, but we're, fingers crossed as we say that. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Peace.